The rain fell in thin, relentless lines over the cracked streets of Southside Chicago, soaking the broken pavement and washing dust into the gutters. But it did nothing to clean the bitterness that lived inside Amara Johnson. At just 19, her life already felt older than the city itself, heavy, bruised, and unfair. She stood at the bus stop with a torn cardigan pulled tight around her thin shoulders, her dark skin glistening under the streetlight as cold water slid down her arms. Around her, people rushed past, coats zipped, heads down, everyone too busy surviving their own lives to notice the quiet pain in hers. Amara had learned long ago that the world rarely stopped for girls like her, young, black, poor, and unwanted in the one place that was supposed to be home. Her mother had died when Amara was 13, leaving behind memories that hurt more than the emptiness. Warm hands brushing her hair at night, soft humming while cooking cheap meals, whispered promises that life would one day be better. Those promises died the same day her mother did, replaced by the sharp voice of her stepmother, Lorraine, a woman whose heart seemed carved from ice and resentment. Lorraine never hid her hatred. From the first day she moved in, Amara became a reminder of another woman, another love, another life Lorraine could never compete with. The house that once felt small but safe turned into a prison of whispered insults, impossible chores, and nights where Amara cried silently into her pillow, afraid even her tears might anger the woman who controlled her fate. Lorraine believed kindness was weakness, especially toward someone she considered useless. She reminded Amara daily that she ate too much, talked too little, dreamed too big. "You think the world owes you something?" Lorraine would snap while dumping laundry into Amara's arms. "You're lucky I let you stay here." Amara's father, Marcus, once a gentle man, had grown quiet and distant after his wife's death. Grief hollowed him out, and Lorraine filled the empty space with control. When Amara tried to speak, he avoided her eyes. When Lorraine punished her, he looked away. Silence became his language, and it hurt worse than shouting. Amara learned to survive by disappearing, doing chores before being asked, speaking only when spoken to, shrinking herself into the background. Like a shadow no one noticed unless it got in the way. School was her only escape. There she buried herself in books, reading about places she'd never see, people who rose from nothing to everything. Teachers noticed her intelligence, her quiet determination, and some even tried to help. But Lorraine hated that too. "Education won't feed you," she'd sneer. "A husband will." The word husband began to follow Amara like a curse. Lorraine talked about marriage not as love, but as a transaction, a way to get rid of a burden. Every argument, every slammed door ended the same way. "You'll see. I'll find you someone. Then you'll know how good you have it here." Amara tried to ignore it, but fear crept into her bones. She had seen girls forced into marriages they didn't choose, their dreams folded away like old clothes. She promised herself it wouldn't happen to her, even if she didn't know how to stop it. The breaking point came on a night when the house smelled of burnt oil and anger. Lorraine had invited guests, church, friends who smiled politely while judging everything with their eyes. Amara served food quietly, her hands trembling. One woman glanced at her and whispered something to Lorraine, who laughed loudly. Yes, she's old enough," Lorraine replied. Amara felt the room spin. After the guests left, Lorraine's mask dropped. She slammed the door shut and turned to Amara with a smile that made her stomach twist. "I've made arrangements," she said calmly. "You're getting married." Amara's heart pounded. "Married to who?" she whispered. Lorraine shrugged. "A man who needs a wife and won't ask questions. A beggar, really. Sleeps near the old station. No family, no money. Perfect for you." The word beggar echoed in Amara's ears like a gunshot. She looked to her father, standing in the corner, but he stared at the floor. "Please," Amara cried. "I don't want this." Lorraine's eyes hardened. "You don't get to want. You leave my house in 3 days, one way or another." That night, Amara didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sirens outside. Fear wrapped around her chest so tightly she struggled to breathe. She imagined her future, married off to a stranger, trapped in another cage, this one with no door at all. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She thought of her mother's voice, the promises she made, and felt anger rise beneath the fear. Was this really all her life was meant to be? Just survival, just endurance? By morning her eyes were swollen, but something inside her had shifted. She didn't have a plan, but she knew one thing. She would not beg for mercy from a woman who had none to give. 3 days later, under a dull gray sky, Lorraine dressed Amara in a simple borrowed dress and marched her toward the courthouse. People stared, some curious, some pitying, but no one stopped them. The groom waited outside, leaning against a wall, his clothes worn, his beard untrimmed. He looked older than her, but his eyes were calm, observant, not desperate like Lorraine described. When their eyes met, Amara expected disgust or indifference. Instead, she saw something else, quiet strength and maybe sadness. Lorraine pushed Amara forward. "This is her," she said sharply. The man nodded slowly. "My name is Elijah," he said softly. His voice was steady, respectful. That surprised her. Inside the courthouse, the ceremony was quick, almost careless. No smiles, no celebration. Just signatures, cold words, and a stamp that sealed her fate. Lorraine smiled for the first time in years. "Good riddance," she muttered as she walked away, leaving Amara standing beside a man she barely knew. As they stepped back into the street, Amara felt numb. She waited for Elijah to say something cruel, to remind her of how low she'd fallen. Instead, he turned to her and said quietly, "You didn't choose this." "I know." Her breath caught. "Why did you agree?" she asked. Elijah looked down the street before answering. "Because sometimes people think they're throwing away trash when they're handing over treasure." She didn't understand his words, but they stayed with her. They walked together in silence, two strangers bound by cruelty they didn't create. Amara's life, as she knew it, was over. She had been forced into marriage with a man the world called a beggar. She believed this was the end of her story, the final proof that dreams were for other people. She had no idea that this moment, born from hatred and humiliation, was the beginning of something so unbelievable that no one, not even Amara herself, could have imagined it. The first night Amara spent as Elijah's wife felt unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. They walked for nearly an hour after leaving the courthouse, passing abandoned shops, flickering streetlights, and corners where men huddled around small fires in rusted barrels. Every step tightened the knot in her chest. This was it, she thought. This was where her life narrowed into a single suffocating path. Elijah stopped in front of an old brick building that looked forgotten by time. One window glowed faintly on the second floor. He unlocked the door with a key pulled from his pocket. Not stolen or forced, but his own. That alone confused her. Inside, the hallway smelled of dust and soap, not rot. They climbed the stairs in silence. When Elijah opened the apartment door, Amara froze. It wasn't luxury, far from it, but it was clean. A small couch, a wooden table, shelves lined with books, and a narrow bed neatly made. This was not the home of a beggar sleeping on the streets. Her mind raced with questions, but fear kept her quiet. Elijah noticed her confusion. "You can sit," he said gently. "You must be tired." His voice carried no ownership, no expectation. Amara sat slowly, clutching the edge of the couch as if it might disappear. "I don't understand," she finally said. "They said you were—" She stopped, embarrassed. Elijah smiled faintly. "A beggar?" he finished. "Yes, that's what people see when they don't look closely." He poured her a glass of water and placed it on the table, keeping a respectful distance. "You're safe here," he added. Safe? The word felt foreign. She nodded, unsure whether to believe him. That night, he slept on the floor, insisting she take the bed. Amara lay awake, staring into the dark, listening to his steady breathing. For the first time in years, no one yelled at her. No one demanded anything. The silence was unsettling, but also strangely comforting. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. Elijah left early every morning, returning late in the evening. He never explained where he went, and Amara didn't ask. She spent her time cleaning the small apartment, cooking simple meals, and reading the books on his shelves. Books about business, economics, history, and leadership. This was not the library of a homeless man. Every page deepened her confusion. When Elijah returned each night, he thanked her for the food, asked how her day was, and listened, really listened when she spoke. No one had done that before. Still, she remained guarded. Kindness, she had learned, often came with strings attached. She waited for the moment the mask would drop. On the fourth day, Amara followed Elijah outside, curiosity overpowering fear. She watched from across the street as he spoke with a group of men near the old train station. They were dressed simply, some rough around the edges, but they listened to Elijah with respect. One man laughed, another clapped him on the back. This was not how people treated a beggar. Amara's heart pounded, as she realized the truth was far more complicated than Lorraine's. Cruelty allowed. That evening she confronted him. "Who are you, really?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elijah studied her face for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth she was ready for. "I am a man who lost everything once," he said slowly, "and a man who chose to disappear." That wasn't an answer, but it was enough to tell her that secrets lived between the walls of their small apartment. As the week passed, Amara felt herself changing. The constant tension in her shoulders eased. She laughed once, softly, surprised by the sound of it. Elijah noticed and smiled, not possessively, but with warmth. For the first time, she felt seen not as a burden or a problem, but as a person. Yet fear lingered. Happiness had always been temporary in her life. On the 7th morning, Elijah woke her early. "Pack a bag," he said calmly. Panic shot through her. "Why? Where are we going?" Elijah met her eyes. "Somewhere you deserve to be." Her hands shook as she packed her few belongings. She followed him out, heart racing, mind spiraling with possibilities. Abandonment, betrayal, danger. They drove to a private airstrip outside the city. Amara's breath caught when she saw it. A massive, gleaming jet, sleek and white, with dark-tinted windows. She stopped walking. This isn't funny," she whispered. Elijah turned to her, his expression serious. "I never joke about your life." As they approached the jet, men in tailored suits greeted Elijah with respectful nods. "Welcome back, sir," one said. Amara felt dizzy. "Back?" Elijah took her hand, not to control her, but to steady her. "Amara," he said softly, "the world lied to you. So did your stepmother. I'm not a beggar. I'm a man who needed to know if you could see beyond appearances." Tears filled her eyes as realization crashed over her. The humiliation, the forced marriage, the pain, it had all led here. As they boarded the jet, Amara glanced back at the city that had broken her. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing: her old life was over, and the people who thought they had destroyed her were about to learn a very expensive lesson.